Well, welcome everyone. Good to see you. Before starting this act of accusation that Gustavo asked me to do and that I will try to do myself, I want to do it with the right spirit. So I want to start this j'accuse in a good spirit. The right spirit is a joyful spirit. So you may think the j'accuse, oh, Gustavo, like something that is sad, dark. So the j'accuse reminds us of something very ancient, but this will not be my spirit, even if, as you will see, I won't hide you anything or certain things. But I believe that in this very moment of human history, if we truly want to fight against this oligarchic structure that we will talk about, we have to preserve and seek and animate and be animated with a joyful spirit. That is the spirit of victory. It's not anymore the time of crying, self-pity. These are exactly the feelings that the oligarchy wants to put in our hearts, because in this way we are powerless, we're weak, we feel powerless under this almighty power. This is what they want. Therefore, I want to start within this spirit, and this is the spirit of a great saint who lived in a historical period which have some analogies with our time. It is the 5th century after Christ, when the Roman Empire is collapsing. During this period, this breakdown, instead of whining, crying, or poisoning himself by hating, and also just only underlining the injustice of his time, but without condemnation, as, for example, you will become like the monkey of Zarathustra, which spends all his time to curse the city and all its fruits. No, Benedetto, Saint Benedict from Norcia, he concentrates, he isolates himself and rediscovers a center, a focus within himself, a deep inspiration. And from that very point of view, he starts a new culture in this world. And in his rule, he says, let us arise. Finally, let us arise, because the Holy Scripture shakes us by saying that it is already time, and it's now time to wake up from our sleep. So this is the spirit within which I want to start my j'accuse. And I think we must feel, and you need spiritual practices, and we must feel all the time now that we have already won. We have already won. There are zombies that keep dominating, they keep accumulating the treasures, but they are dead. They are walking dead. This is the spirit to do a serious j'accuse. Otherwise, our j'accuse do not arise any accusation. They are not serious alternative to this system. They are not. They lack credibility. So now we will start. So we heard a passage from Lavalle and Dardot, who says, they tell us, don't forget when you accuse the media system, don't forget about the level of these media, because these system of communication every day and all days is putting up a show that is aimed consciously, more or less consciously, that it's aimed to distract us and to let us into despair. In other words, it organizes a collective hypnosis which repeats itself, and it's continuing repeating itself. They are, if you turn on the television, there is an hypnosis because they repeat things and words and numbers, and they quote things that we don't really understand. They talk about things, little things, but they continue speaking about little things while in the world there are big things happening, but we're totally distracted because they're putting up a show always following you. So, I was today at the Tiburtina station in Rome, and there were all these advertisements everywhere, and there were digital advertisements, and then there was a face of a kid in one of these advertisements, and that says, "I'm hungry," because the 8% of the Italian kids are starving, apparently. And then suddenly you see another advertisement that is about a chocolate snake, and then you have another one about Salvini, a politician here in Italy, who invited us to a manifestation. And then other messages, and this is foolish, because they are one after another. So we have to understand that this system is putting up a daily show that is mixed up with horrors, obscenities, advertisements, and this is all aimed to let us become dumb and numb and to create idiots. And this is very important, it's not secondary. And I want to quote now a sentence by Chomsky that describes very well what I'm saying. We got to understand this. We have to tell this to each other. It must become a culture. We have to understand that we need to have some place within the mass and the media communication, and at least within the RAI, which is a public service and should give space to democratic freedom and speech. So we have to fight for this. And Chomsky says that polemics and controversies can be also violent. And we know that there are so many around that may be built up from somebody else. These are, problems that you will have to pay attention, but then disappear all of a sudden. And Johnson says that polemics can be also violent on a condition that they respect the prerequisites to maintain the status quo of the elites. In fact, if you see, there are lots of talk shows, and they're talking about controversial things, and then we're talking about quota 100, and they're talking about this issue that seems to be very important, that there are controversies within the government, but this is all bullshit. It's really little things. These are not very important things, but they're created and magnified. And again, these public polemics have to be supported because they contribute to reinforce the fake doctrines, and they consolidate the impression that they're really important for our freedom. And so we fight for them. And it seems that these are very important topics, but I also, I'm talking to the RAI, and I'm talking to the board of administration to put on a program which can question the main agenda of the mainstream TV channels, and there are things that are more relevant than talking about Quota 100. Maybe it's very important, should be very important, could be very important on our daily debate to talk about elites and oligarchies. That could be in our agenda. So, my dear audience, today I would like to offer you 3 key points to contribute to this cultural revolution that could actually orientate in a new way human history. We can ask ourselves, after the 20th century, in a more mature way, in which way we want to shape our humanity, in which way we want to educate and build up a new world, especially for the new generations. And I think this is something real, this is more urgent, important, since TV news also repeat us that we have really few years to transform our society in something anew before we all suicide. So if we don't change completely our economical and industrial system, and therefore the society, we will all be condemned. Shouldn't it be more normal and important to take care of these topics, to discuss and reflect about this, something more serious that is really challenging, and not just debating about Papete, Italia Viva, to reduce the number of parliaments? These are really small things. So now, so there are 3 passages that I want to talk about today. So, first of all, oligarchy exists. Nowadays, we don't really discuss about that. Really few. If you talk about those things, you're accused of conspiracy. I was talking in the TV show, and a very famous journalist of Corriere della Sera asked me, so, which oligarchy? Why are you talking about oligarchy? Does this exist? Is the same thing happened when people were talking about the mafia and Sicily in Palermo. They thought, okay, this is just an invention of people that hate Sicily. So oligarchy exists, and we have to clarify what it is. We have to recognize that an oligarchy exists, and then we have to take care of this. And this will be also a very important topic to be seen maybe in a TV show on a daily basis, because we have to deepen many aspects of this oligarchy, and we know that it exists. You know that I love to quote other people, other thinkers, so that you can listen to other voices For example, Vandana Shiva, she is one of the most important environmental activists. She is Indian, she comes from India. And, for example, in his book, Il pianeta di tutti, so the planet for everyone, she says the Oxfam report about the economy of the 1%, so the economy in favor of the 1%, but actually is in favor of the 0.01%. This is the truth. If you remember Occupy Wall Street movement, but it's not the 1%. Anyway, this report affirms that 188 out of 201 most important enterprises and companies in the world are based at least in one taxation haven. Also, 9 out of 10 private partners of the World Economic Forum are present in a tax haven, and these big corporations cost every year to the economy of developing countries at least $1 billion a year. And they talk about 2 billions and 3 billions, and that we have major problems. We can mention names. For example, Chevron, that it's a huge oil company. The Chevron has an offshore asset value in a haven taxation place around $45,000 and $440 million. And for example, Apple, the very liberal, progressive people that think of human development, they have an offshore asset of $241,000 million. Another name, Google, $58,300 million of assets in these haven taxation places, and so on. Vandana Shiva is giving us a list. Then, even sometimes it happened to me on my Facebook page that people asked me, so, but who are those people? Where is this oligarchy? And we have a list in this book of 100 names, among which Vandana Shiva talks about Bill Gates, the big philanthropist, who has a financial asset of around $75 billion, of which many of them in having tax countries. So oligarchy exists. And the University of Zurich, 7-8 years ago, organized a team of mathematicians that try to identify who are the corporations that govern the global economy. You can go online and you can find this information. They found out that the structure of this global financial power can be just reduced to 147 corporations, most of them British, and 50 of them represent the most important, let's say, the directive heart. Most of them are banks or financial and insurance groups. The study detective also 50 corporations that are deeply interconnected with these other companies, but they could not actually understand what is the real heart of these holding and corporations. So oligarchy exists, and this is number one. And Luciano Gallino, before he died, talking about the European component of this oligarchy, says there is a question, but how many are the European oligarchs? We can just estimate some numbers. There are a few thousands people and partners that have a great power. They are inside the institution and corporation within the society, and they can elaborate the development of the European Union that has a greater influence respect to 500 millions of European citizens. So, as Galina says, there are a few thousand people that are controlling the political, economic, financial, the media, the editorial and cultural control of Europe. And this explains why we have weak, very weak resistances and opposition to this power. And we ask ourselves, so why people that are aged 20 years old, 30 years old, these guys that were actually massacred, the generation that was mostly massacred since the beginning of modernity, why are they tolerating everything? Why aren't they resisting to this in a pacific way? Why there is no revolution against this system? It's a generation of occasional workers, a generation of graduated people that work for €4 an hour, but not only in Italy, but also the same happens in Germany. The gig economy, the so-called economy of occasional jobs, is the economy in which even if you work and work a lot, you're always poor. And maybe you have 2 jobs, but you have no money to put up a family or to buy an apartment or house or start something new. But why? Why aren't we rising up against the system? Actually, because the system is very powerful, is strong, and is using many hypnotic systems and ways to distract us. So, first of all, oligarchy exists, and the second is that this system is very coherent and it makes everything to let us believe that it does not exist, like Satan. Baudelaire said that Satan is the only spiritual entity that hopes that people do not believe in him. So if we don't see the oligarchy, if they don't show up, so you have to think, you have to study, you have to watch TV with free eyes. You really need to have a critical mind, to have a spiritual life in order to see this oligarchy. But this oligarchy is very precise, has its own philosophy, its own politics, and terrible and devastating effects on single lives and also on public lives. So what is the philosophy? They have a philosophy. They let us believe that there is no beliefs, no big systems, there are no more great narratives. So Gustavo Cecchini, why are you organizing a jacuzzi? Maybe you feel bad, maybe you need psychological assistance, maybe, you're a social misfit, and you guys, what are you doing here? Why aren't you just quietly watching a beautiful TV show, maybe on Prime Vision, Infinity, Netflix? Why are you here? What are you doing here? We are giving you everything. The world, happiness, and the rest is just illusion, philosophies. But actually, this apparently empty vision, it's a philosophy. This is a materialistic, reductionist and nihilistic philosophy. It's a very precise way of thinking for which the human beings is an empty entity whose only goal is to produce and to consume. Consume and produce. It's like, you are a digestive tract that stretches from mouth to the anus, and you don't have to bust your fucking balls, and you have to fill up yourself with everything until you die, and you don't have to break your balls. You have to consume and look at the advertisement with those views. So what is the kind of thinking that is behind the commercial advertisements? So these are not just stupid things. Actually, these images are not neutral. And these images are very important. Like, they are so word like the Mona Lisa, and they studied it in a psychological way, and they are repeating and repeating and repeating this repetition of messages. Then you will have it stuck into your brain, and it touches your soul, and it leaves a mark into your soul as if you're a beast. And this is a very specific philosophy. It's a materialistic philosophy, and it's a vision of the world because they want to make money, a lot of money. And there are people that go around the world and saying that, nothing has a sense, and that we're just plankton to the world. But actually, this is the way that are persuading us to be nothing. We're like animals, cattle going to a slaughterhouse. This is the condition that they want us to live in. We're chicken in a farm, like Nietzsche said, and do want to have this, but if you don't do anything against this, and you don't take the opportunity to understand this, then do not blame other people for living the way that we're living. And of course, the oligarchy has a philosophy and a politics, and this is the philosophy. So you only have to think about consumption and consumerism. So this is the only philosophy. I do not pretend to talk about metaphysical transcendency, not even, about talking about, politicians should explain us where is the vision, where is the horizon, and people now are blaming that there is no direction, there is no vision. But if there is a vision that you see that is arising, then the entire system is trying to make fun of it, it's calming us down, is saying, that, just be quiet, don't bother us, just, go to Europe in an easy way, calm down, and let us, we are the big one, we will continue and work for you, and continues to drink Coke and eat popcorns, and we will have the money, and we will put the money offshore. And of course, Coke as a company is obviously in this list. So the politics of this oligarchy is just that, politics should simply obey to what they want to do, complete deregulation of the market and the so-called free market. So free in which way? Free for whom? For those maybe that move their factories and move the factories from Italy to Turkey, destroying the Italian industry. Who is earning money? are the workers at Whirlpool that are earning more money, moving industries on the free market, or is Whirlpool? Of course it is Whirlpool, and it's the industry and the companies are earning more money. They don't care about other people. They move companies and industries. They pay less taxes. There are no unions. They tell us that we are spending too much money. They will pay less taxes there, and they convince us that we are wasting money, which is bullshit. But this is not true, and they tell us that, the Italian public debt depends on the social welfare, but it's not like this, and we know it's dated back to the 80s. The politics is this one: to privatize, to cut on social welfare, to have more poor people, and workers are poorer and poorer every year. And this is within their framework. And so, for example, what is their politics? They say that our deficit this year is 2.2, and they said, okay, we are not very happy about this, but maybe 2.04 is best. And now maybe, okay, Gentiloni is the nice guy leading the European Union. He's a friend of Marco Guzzi, but this is all bullshit. And they say that we have to change the pacts that we have, but when will it be possible to change this agreement? What should we see more and more to be convinced that they are destroying everything? What shall we see more to understand this? And for example, if we're always watching TV and we are on mainstream TV, we always a debate between Cottarelli and Fornero, and we never listen to other economists that are not in line with this neoliberalism, and we have many, but we don't know them because they don't go on TV. And that they could unmask all this, they could tell us something new. So the politics of the oligarchy is clear. We'll listen to von der Leyen. There's these beautiful words, lots of imagination and speculation, but until I don't see this becoming real, I don't believe in them. So, and the third key point of this philosophy and the consequences of it and of this politics is very heavy. If we analyze, for example, the consequences on a democratic level and then environmental level. Now, I want to quote again Luciano Gallino, great Italian sociologist, and he says, in front of the power of the oligarchy, the democratic process is emptied of its very meaning in the whole Europe. Almost nothing of what is discussed within a normal round of voting has something to do with the deep reasons of a European crisis, and never talks about the possible remedies. So what Gallino says is terrible. He says that everything that we listen to when we talk about European crisis and European politics, we never listen to topics, argumentations that can give reasons and can give us solutions about it. Now, quoting again Vandana Shiva, she says again, in many cases, this 1%, again this oligarchy, invests their own richness to buy institutions, to promote global politics, and distort the public priorities without any social responsibility, nor a democratic control. The very fact that the 1% can control the richness, the wealthy of 99%, actually, what kind of democracy is where we have 0.01% of the people, and then they are having in their hands all richness, and then there are maybe 6 billionaires. So 6 people that are billionaires in the world, they possess the richness of 3.7 billion of people. So democracy was born as a way of having a government of the poor. So Aristotle defines democracy as the government of the poor. In other words, the government of those that, in absence of democracy, would be crushed by an oligarchy of powerful people with lots of money. Is this a democracy? A democratic system in which 6 persons have owned the richness of 3.7 billion people. What is this? What the fuck is this? Is this real democracy? What does it mean? Okay, if we look at the environment, you know better than I know what is the product of this vision of the world, of this philosophy, of this politics, of this economy. Few lines again quoted by the book of Vandana Shiva. These are really strong lines. So the 1% is not only a quantity, it is a system. It is an economic system that is shaped by billionaires and powerful people, where greed and accumulation are considered virtues and qualities that society must compensate instead of being considered aberration and to be corrected through democratic processes. So democracy should be a system of balancing that can balance richnesses and redistribute the richness. Democracy is born within this goal. So the so-called tax policies is aimed for the redistribution of richness, not to let grow up inequalities to the point of madness. The rise of the 1%, the rise of this 1% embodies the willingness of ruling out that instinct, its unavoidable consequences are ecocide and genocide. And this is not the future, the past, this is the present. It's already taking place, and for example, this is what is happening in Africa, America, and Canada. For instance, Naomi Klein, the writer, and her studies, in my opinion, very interesting. If you want to read something interesting with further scientific insights, are very interesting. For example, a book, and some titles are "This Changes Everything: Capitalism Against the Climate," "On Fire." There is another book. And for those who wants to have all the references about and the documentation about these things in a scientific perspective, there is also "This Changes Everything: Capitalism and Climate Against Climate." So in this system, we as human beings, we risk to be no more aware of what is happening. And this is a matter and subject of the newest sociological studies in Europe. we are in a sort of collective dizziness that we developed, and it's a point of no return. And I'm thinking about the studies of Byung-Chul Han, Helmut Rosa, but also Ulrich Beck. For instance, these great sociologists are telling us that we're losing the essence of freedom. And what does it mean now? The meaning of being free. And we are now risking to be in a blob, to be in part of this global homogenization. So everything is the same, there is nothing that differs from one thing, there are no differences, so we live day by day in a distorted way. Everything is sticky as a mud, and this is a great danger. So this is the last point, and I try to tell you this in very few lines, a synthesis of many things that I read, I studied. For those who want to understand everything deeper, I wrote many books about this. There is lots of material around. So what can we do? How can we start up a new kind of revolutionary movement? We are forced to go back to a concept of revolution. Well, of course, we must talk about revolution and not evolution. So we must go back to this very modern concept that it's dated back at least 500 years ago, since the Copernican revolution. And I'm not talking about the violence of the revolution of the 19th and 20th century. I am talking about a cultural revolution, a deeply democratic, non-violent, peaceful and joyful revolution. I'm not talking about reforms only. It's not a matter of reforms. This is not enough. The reforms are those one that European Union is asking us to go on. But we're talking about revolution. This is a concept that also Bauman talked about, and even Pope Francis is talking about revolution. And I'm not talking about Trotsky's bomb maker. Ulrich Beck talks about the necessity of going back to the concept of revolution. For example, climate change forces us to rethink the concept of revolutionary practices, best practices. So how will this be possible? Well, I think we must improve some of our human qualities to be able to face this challenge. First of all, we must keep calm. It might sound weird to talk about this revolution, and that we need calm people, that they can be extremely quick, because they are extremely quiet. And in this context, of course, the Eastern cultures can help us understand, and we must be calm and quiet like an angel, and at the same time we must be quick as a snake, a copper snake. So we have to be patient, calm. We shall have courage, deep courage. For example, the kids that put on Friday for Future, they felt something. because what they're saying is true, and maybe they're manipulated by people, but I don't care. I wasn't waiting for Greta Thunberg to show up, because I was talking about these same things during the 80s, and I published this, and there is no more time. So climate change are undergoing, and we cannot stop them, and this is the truth that nobody tells us. Even if we would stop now all the emissions, the change in the climate change will continue. This modification will continue, because nowadays we're suffering for all the things and the changes of the past 100, 200 years. This is the truth. And then, in my opinion, we shall work on 3 different levels simultaneously with great intelligence. We need to have a brighter vision, but of course we have to have technical, economical, engineering expertise, great expertise, and these 2 levels cannot be separated. We need visionary people that are also technicians, but sometimes we have technicians with no visions, or visionary people that are lacking of the expertise. So we have, a separation, like technocrats or people that are pure spirits, but we have to work on these 3 levels: economical, political, and cultural. In an anthropological way, we have to ask ourselves again and to design the essence and the understanding of the human being. So who is the human being? So the culture, the true culture, is the constant question. So who are you? Who is this being that is self-conscious, like me, like you? And this is the fundamental level, the culture one. Actually, we must change all the narratives of late modernity. We have to change the reductionistic vision of the human being, even from a philosophical perspective. And it's possible, it's been already done. So philosophically, but also, we all know that the inner self, we human being, it's not something material. It's nothing material. It's not pure matter. So what we call self has nothing to do with the matter. And even the matter has nothing to do with the matter, as Planck says. Okay, in a famous conference in Florence, as a physicist, he said, I have to tell you something, the matter does not exist. So the matter is energy, it's space, it's fires, we could say. However, this matter does not really exist. The atom, which has been searched for many years, does not really exist, and we have to investigate this. We know what is the self, the human self. They said, oh yes, the human self is an animal, or is a computer. This is what they said to us. The truth is that even if you study lay people and philosophers that seriously question this phenomenon, they are aware that you cannot divide the human self. And this is all and you cannot just, say the self, the human self, you can relate it to something else. No, it's a mystery. Also philosophically, we know that the human self, it's a great mystery. This is the truth. Regardless of your faith, and we know that this big mystery, which is the human self, is fulfilled only within relationships, only in the richness and in the deep of its relationship. So we know that the human self is a mysterious entity that finds satisfaction only in the depth of its relationship. And so we have to confront with this. And this oligarchy system has all the interest to tell us that it's obvious that the self is like this. But actually, this is the topic. This is the question that every human being asks himself, and this is the very core of our culture, is to ask ourselves, so what am I? And this is what we call culture. And then to answer to this with words. So culture is not this shit that they let us eat. Like in that movie of Pier Paolo Pasolini, Salò, by Pasolini, and he understood everything, and that's why he killed him. And of course, who knows the story of Pasolini's death? We know that this is another giant bullshit. So culture is not what they are proposing us now. So it's not entertainment culture, it's not just a curiosity, it's not gossiping, this is not culture. So it's not a hobby. So let's go to Holland and let's see a Van Gogh exposition in Amsterdam. But you have Van Gogh in Rome, and if we have if there is a show in Holland, yes, I'll go there, and I don't give a shit taking a flight that it's polluting. It's polluting the world. And Van Gogh, Van Gogh was a very serious and extreme, revolutionary and Christian character. He would have committed suicide beforehand, knowing what we're doing with him, how we're using him. Culture is not also the cultural heritage, the cultural assets, and all these good things is not culture. These ministers of culture, they are not really the minister of culture. They're just bureaucrats. They're in charge of some museums, but they're not answering to the big questions: who you are, what are you doing on this earth. So I don't care about the museum. I'm not interested in this dead things that I have to see. I don't want to go to the museum. And it was right, Marinetti, we should put fire on museums. So a work of art that ends up in a museum, it's sad. It's like, visiting a cemetery. Then, if we talk about, the great art of the 14th and 15th century, these artists gave their own soul, because in front of these paintings and pictures, they wanted that people could contemplate God, something great. They did not create their arts to be stored then in a museum. So we have to go back to the very and essential meaning of what is culture. We have to reinforce our soul. We have to change. But of course, the oligarchy and this oligarchic system wants our soul to be ruined, to be lost, and the system wants you not to think about this. So we ask you things, and you don't have to ask yourself anything. So shall we change the Maastricht Treaties? This is a good question, and Cottarelli is giving you the answer. And these are the very important questions. If you ask a question about economics and neoliberalism, then it's right that somebody that knows about it answers to you. But you see what I mean? Do not make other questions. So what is important, and the problem is not to be, to vote left parties or right parties. The problem is, do we want to create, are we able to live a new rising humanity, or do we want to stay and remain this suicidal humanity, this humanity that is now dying? We must create a new political and poetic imagination, new words, new dreams, new visions. So that's why I wrote a new dictionary of unheard language. I was forced to write because it is a language which is no more heard. And this language that I want to hear must be spoken everywhere. So this is a paradox. The anthropology, the vision of humanity, this nihilistic and materialistic vision, we have to ask ourselves, what is a person? What is a man? So if we go to the Article 3 of the Italian Constitution, is about the whole development of a person. But what is a person? Who is a person? What does it mean to be a person? How can a person realize himself? What does a person need to have a full development? So we are talking about the Article 3 of the Constitution, and it's talking about the development, the whole development of a person. Is it clear? To me, it's not clear. It's not really clear. Of course, you need a job, you need to study to have a full development, but it's not enough. A person, I mean, every one of us, we have other needs. For instance, in a strong way, we need family, we need community, we need a place to take care of. We need these things as opposed to the devastation of the profit that is now destroying family, community, because the profit does not really care about those relationships. And this is what we should do. It's a huge cultural work. We must rethink the mystery of the man, his dignity, the mystery of being a person, and put all this to the very center. And from this, we will have a new politics, revolutionary politics, something new that cannot be normalized. A human being who understands those things, even a little bit, and can share them, could never be reordered or, could never be within the restoration and put into order. But you need this root, you need to practice a spiritual life, to have this brightness, this vision. Even if you're left alone, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. For example, in the biblical tradition, this is the standard, not only in the biblical tradition, but it's always like this. The voice of the people of Israel is always represented by one only person, like Jeremiah or Elijah, until the Christ. Jeremiah, like the Christ, has everyone against him. The political power is against him, the religious power is against him, all the people is against him, but this is not important, because this only person is the future of the world. He won the world. So therefore, as you all know, I think that the revolution of the 21st century will have to have a very strong spiritual root. The non-violent revolutionary person will have to take care very strongly of his soul with daily inner spiritual practices, because there will be seduction by the power, persecution by the power, and of course we know that the power is always seductive, and if it cannot seduce you, then it persecutes you. And this is the history that we have behind, and that it's also in front of us. And, to face all this, we need happy people. We need happy people because they have a relationship, because they do not base their philosophy upon what the system tells them to do, because they have other places where they feel fulfilled. So we need a new culture to reshape a political view of the world, and the economy will be just the very end, the last step. So we will reshape the economy in this way. But they want to let you think and believe that the only possible reality is the economical context. Only economy is real. So we have to discuss only about economy. So we have to talk about Istat, which is the statistics, is giving us numbers, and this is the very truth of man. No, this is not. This is a wrong philosophy, and we know that numbers are important, but it's not the ultimate truth, and it's not the deepest truth, and this does not tell me who I am. As Wittgenstein said, there was surely not an irrational person. He said, if science would one day give us answers to all the questions, I think it would never start to understand mine. But this is correct this way. It's not a fault. Science has its own goal, but it's a secondary role that he has. So indeed, we have to understand what is a human being. What is the good? What is justice? How can you say what those things are if you don't have any vision of the world? So, for example, why aren't we asking ourselves, okay, why don't we tax in a better way the financial movements throughout the world? Why don't we do that? The answer is just because we don't have a vision. There is no vision, there is not a politics, there is no system that can put these oligarchies, these financial and powerful people into their own place. And we're talking about for example, the Article 42 in our Constitution, that it's saying in our Constitution that private property is not an absolute. It's not an absolute. So many European treaties are against our Constitution. That's why the Constitution, it's not something good and interesting for some people that would like to change it, and makes certain people nervous. In some environments, people says that the national constitutions are an obstacle and are hindering the liberalization of all the markets and the trades, and it's an obstacle to the globalization process. And we have to start from this very new vision of humanity, which must be rooted also within a perspective of relationship. And we have to learn how to be together, to stick together, to get together, and talk about this project. And Naomi Klein also about these rights. If we want to have some hope to be able to make a leap and a change in our civilization that it's required now, we must start again to believe that humanity is not selfish and only greedy according to those models that are continuously proposed by a set of media sources which go from reality shows to neoclassical economy. So we must start and believe in a different way. We must start to believe in a new way. We must ask ourselves again, in what do we want to believe? Because believe in something is a choice. We must realize that it's our choice in what we want to believe. We can believe that this world it's an inert matter to be exploited up and devastated, or we can believe that we are a living mystery, an illuminated consciousness, which is here for a mission, and that this mission will be accomplished anyway. So we have to fight. We have to fight, of course, also to be together and to stick together and to work and gain some places in the mass media channels, TV shows, especially in the public services, because now this is our goal, is to change a little bit the agenda. So this is our primary goal, and I wish you all good luck.
Sì, sì.
So this long applause says a lot about the intensity, the effectiveness, the passion that Marco Guzzi put in his talk. And now if you want, he is here to reply to any of your questions. I have a couple of questions. Hi, my name is Antonio. So you mentioned 201 corporations which move huge financial capitals offshore to pay less taxes, among them Bill Gates, and there are many more people, among them also George Soros, 22 billion financial assets. You talked also about potential leaders of my generation. At least in mine, you quoted Greta Thunberg. So the environmentalist vision, the climate change, but I have a question and a doubt. Greta Thunberg was in the front row of the United Nations, and she talks to the delegates of all our countries, but then in the back rows, however, she finds in front of her the oligarchs that you mentioned before. So, who should I trust? The oligarch people, they are funding Greta Thunberg, that is bringing a new vision, or should I not trust Greta Thunberg because she's funded by the same politician and oligarchs that are behind them? So who should I trust? Well, you shouldn't trust anyone. I don't trust anyone in this way. I believe that what is extremely revolutionary is the critical thinking. So, go deep down into the subjects, get an idea. Greta Thunberg, as I said before, she's not talking about anything new, because during 1989 I was talking to Alex Langer about ecological conversion, or during the 90s I was talking to Bob von Sachs, and in an interview we were talking about the same things that Greta is talking now, 30 years ago, and it is that we have to change radically the structure of our consumption and also our economic development. The problem is that we didn't do anything. The first UN conference about the environment dates back to 1992, and they were talking about the same things we're talking today. The problem is that since then, CO2 emissions, instead of decreasing, is increasing, and now it's around 57%. Therefore, you shouldn't just trust Greta, but however, Greta can be interesting because I don't know for which reason she has done what she's done, but she animated she started a new debate of global interest. So we know that the history is very ambiguous, and we know that the oligarchs and those powers, they know how to use everything, any kind of trick for their own sake and goals. So it's a war, Antonio. This is your name, right? So therefore, let's admit that Greta is a puppet in the hand of certain people that have those powers. Well, we will bluff twice in a very revolutionary manner. So the revolutionary minds that we should cultivate, they have to know how to live this ambiguity of our history. All these debates on Facebook are for people that are powerless, because they tell us, okay, Greta is being funded by such and such people, but who cares? I mean, what does it all change? Is it true or not true what scientists are telling us, that if we do not take actions and some new measures before 2030, actually there will be a catastrophe. But I think we're already beyond this threshold. We are beyond the increasement that was decreed and decided in Paris conference. We're above 2, and we're reaching now 4 degrees above the average, and this is a very dangerous thing, because there is no probability of survival for any living species on Earth. So, you see? So what Greta said is something that we're elaborating, and it's been elaborated from long time ago, decades, and this could awake our awareness and put in discussion not only an economical system that is suicidal, it's a cultural, philosophical, mental It's an anthropology that developed now in our modernity, which is very ambiguous. And sometimes even Naomi Klein doesn't seem to be very clear when she explains things. So what is the model then that we should now try to push on? Is going back to the economic civilization of the indigenous? Is the economic social system which will make really the difference? I don't think so. I believe that modernity is a very ambiguous process, and I think that there is a big illusion believing that in the past people were living in a better way. I think this is a very fundamentalist, very narrow-minded vision. It's a vision that people are very ignorant. That's why. So how were people living in these wonderful indigenous tribes during 1400 or 1000? So like Rousseau's ideas of a better living in the past. And I don't think that modernity is all negative. I think there is something, an evolution, that it's very nice, it's very important. So internet, this microphone, the washing machine for all women, it's a wonderful thing. When I think about a washing machine, I felt touched. I have tears in my eyes because I'm grateful, because I think of about people helping us, like housekeepers, like Domenica, and she's my housekeeper, and she comes from Abruzzo, and she tells me when she was barefoot going to a torrent, washing the clothes, and she reminds herself of the freezing waters drop falling on her neck, because she was holding a basket full of clothing on her head. So is this the lost paradise? No, I don't think so. So we need to understand modernity. We should understand the ambiguity. We should understand what is positive, and to face all these suicidal challenges that are produced by our modernity. And also, Ulrich Beck underlines this very well when he says that this is a beautiful opportunity. This crisis is an opportunity to deal with all the shadows of our modernity. And so, if you're really interested in this, you have to study, and study a lot, like a crazy. So the true revolution, it's always being done by educated and cultivated people, people that studied like crazy. I mean, for example, Karl Marx, just to mention somebody that certainly did something that moved things in history. He spent all days during the library of London. So, for example, to discuss all these things, we need very strong mind. We need group and groups. And I told, in fact, Gustavo, that the title of this conference should have been, we're against these elites, not against the elites. I do agree that there are people that need to be leaders, and they have to take the task of leadership. But I'm especially against these elites that I consider collaborationist, especially the ones who governed and dominated our culture in the last decades, without shouting, without saying these things, by saying that we're saying always junk, narcissistic and self-referential things. Are there any other questions? Good evening, Professor. So, your lesson was amazing, but I belong to a political party called PMS, Power, Money and Sex. And I think that there are many people that have a membership of this party. Now, I want to say that, in my opinion, the problem is another one. The problem is that oligarchies have had their mutation according to the historical periods, but they always existed. Now, in my head, I'm a person born in 1947, as well as somebody that is born 20, 30 years later. I tried to discover this oligarchy. The 313, does it says anything or ring any bell to you? 1445, Constantine, the Trent Council, does it ring any bell? So, they had the blessing of many popes, including Pope Francis. So, why don't you speak about this oligarchy? We all belong to this PMS. So, you quoted some gospel, but you didn't really go deep down to the matter of, for example, the baptism, that I think it's bullshit. Well, those who know a bit my work knows that I was always very much concerned about the Christian mystery. I wrote many books. I held conferences about this mystery, and it's very important to me. And I think that this new humanity that we are bringing up, we are letting be born again, and giving birth to it, from my point of view, is represented by the humanity revealed by the Christ. So this new relational humanity fulfills himself in free relationship from this point of view, and I'm very messianic in this. I try to write a lot of books about that and explain, is that all this process of revolutions is deeply moved by this spirit, which brought in our modern history a vision of a radical change. So we spoke about this with Diego Fusaro in a previous conference. So the shadows of Christianity, I think this is what you tried to say. In other words, the fact that Christianity during history has often represented a form of hegemony and got along with oligarchic powers. There is no doubt about that. And in my opinion, today we are living a very new moment, what I call the Christian ego. So the ego, which was fed by Christian topics, but always remaining centered in himself. So the one that you said, you talk about the PMS, did never really convert himself. And for example, you were talking about the baptism. So the experience of baptism was just an experience that was never asked by anybody. So since the 4th, 5th century, baptism became something ritual, a gesture that people and population were baptized because the king said that there was a common interest, but there were just few people that really were looking for the spirit of Christianity. For example, Saint Benedict, in his monasteries, these were just people going towards an authentic spiritual quest. But there are really few. And of course, there were some isolated people, for example, in Egypt, hermits, Saint Anthony. There were some martyrs and people that that were deep down into this mystery, and they said, they were voluntary martyrs. They went into cemeteries to live next to the tombs, and they said, we love everything you're afraid of. So this is the history of Christianity, which is also ambiguous, and during the centuries, of course, though it was a kind of power, but in many other respects, there is a Christian spirituality that is telling us something else. And I think that now we're in a particular moment of history that where we can just go back to this root, we can go deeper. And to deepen and rediscover this spiritual practice is not something ideological. In my opinion, it's an initiatory problem. So we can rediscover and have the experience that some things that we felt and maybe we abandoned because we don't believe anymore, in truth, they have something that it's in their heart very true, and we can experience them again. So this is very interesting. I also wrote a book titled Faith and Revolution, because I want to explain these two different poles. I'm convinced that this revolution will have no mental, no spiritual energy if there won't be men and women that had a spiritual experience. And what I say is rediscover the need of transcendency. And this is not about only the Christian religion, it's broader. So we are, as human beings, designed, if you want to say, this way. We're built up this way. Nowadays, we need to rediscover these things seriously. So, what does it mean, again, talking about our constitution? What do we mean? What does it mean to say the integral development of the people? Here I see different TV, radio, internet shows talking about these things. And it's not only a fact for specialized people. It's not only a cultural matter. I don't give a shit about this culture and life. You can really live in a better way if you open up yourself to transcendency. This is what you are, without giving names, if you prefer. You see? So this is a permanent revolution. If you open up to this, even a little bit, if you understand this thing through an experience, it's very difficult that you will be unlined again. Hi, Professor. My name is Antonella. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, this new vision of humanity. So what is the role of school and of teachers within this new vision? The second, in this new vision, in this revolution that you're talking about, so what is the future of work? Well, that's a great question. Would you like to elect me and to vote me as Prime Minister? Well, this is very tough, very difficult. My dear friend, school is a pivotal, central, key element to this new vision. This new vision is a pedagogy that shall start very soon. Mario Lodi, I don't know if you remember this great school teacher. I interviewed him during the 90s or maybe the 80s, and we had a long discussion in which he told me we're not aware of the fact that we are growing up the first generation in the history of anthropology which will get to know the world only through two senses, sight and hearing. In other words, that is in front of television. And we'll have this experience without a constant emotional company and support. I mean, there is no mom and there's no dad that is explaining the world through other senses, you know, without emotional support. And so people are in front of television only with their sight and hearing without an emotional support. We don't know what kind of men are we now growing up. We don't know because this is the first time, and we can have now the first results. We see now our young generation, people in their 20s or 30s, they grew up this way. What characteristics do they have? I would say there are lots of chances and greater qualities and competences. For example, they're really quick in thinking and associate things, but it's also very clear that they have lots of deficits. They cannot really concentrate for a long period, and they have a lack of imagination. Because if you think about a child that is used to observe thousands and thousands of powerful and sophisticated images, which satisfies his imagination, when he will need to imagine something, when he will have to become a creative person, then he will have to struggle to do that. So to me, this explains a certain inertia of this generation, a certain difficulty to imagine, for instance, a strong political aggregation, a strong statement. There is too little creative energy of imagination, so therefore this school for the new humanity will need to be seriously rethought at all levels, from kindergarten to university. Is not adequate enough. Would you like to talk about university? When I was going to university, I remember it was a very sad place. I didn't feel really educated and helped to grow in a mature way as a person, and the work is just the same. So what we know is that also many different works are disappearing. There are lots of studies and recent research that 50% at least of the current job position will disappear. I know there is a recent research by the University of Oxford aimed at evaluating which are the most requested and consolidated jobs for the futures. And when you look at that, then you think we are going back to Stone Age. So the most requested job, one of the most, will be the creative therapist or counselors. So those people that in a creative way are taking care of young people, elderly. So this is a job that will expand enormously. And we already see it. How much do we need care in our society? And this is a job that cannot be replaced by anybody else. We know that robots are already taking the jobs that we are doing or we knew to do, but also the intellectual one, not only physical jobs. Nowadays computers can perform very well, lots of jobs, intellectual jobs, better than some employees, white collars, for example. They can perform better and faster. So indeed, the job market will be rethought within a new economy. And I believe that we shouldn't work to have an income. For example, this is a vision that someone might say is a trivial vision. It's an obvious one, but actually, if we study well economy, we can better understand this vision. It's very consistent. And, if you, for example, if you don't work and if you don't do the job that I'm giving you for 4 or 5 euro, you cannot make a living. For example, if you think about the income of citizenship, the Italian one is just a very minimalistic and simple form. They're thinking that every man in the future will have an income guaranteed. Just, when you're born, and this will be a kind of legacy. So you will have an income. You will have an income that is guaranteed, and then you will look for the kind of job you want to do. And so if we can think about this, and some might say this is a craziness. Well, let's study this very well. This is non-conventional mainstream economy, and it exists, and it's not bringing humanity to slavery. So if we study very well the facts, is that going through this transition, in the next 10, 20 years, there will be millions of unemployed people. Because, for example, the fact is that they want to have time to create new high-tech jobs, and people will be out of the market. So what we'll do with these people? Can we think about an income of dignity and then, give them another kind of work? For instance, we can integrate them into this new organization of taking care of somebody. But of course, we need a greater vision. We need politicians that stand up in front of the people, that can tell these great things and that explain that these things are complicated but possible. And this is a win-win situation for all of us, except for them, these oligarchs. Those people will not earn anything. So the 0.01 of the population will lose. But think about what we can do with all this richness that's so concentrated in the hands of few people. And this is pathologically concentrated, and it's absurd. It's a damage for our democracy and culture. So indeed, we need great revolutionary visions, peaceful, joyful visions. We should be all together, share our vision, open serious agoras of discussions, and of course not only listening to the voices of the conventional economists that always told us the same things and brought us to misery. As Galeno had in his predictions, are these serious economists, people that could not even understand the great breakdown of the Lehman Brothers, are these serious economists? So there is another question here. I would like to ask you one thing. First of all, I thank you. My name is Bruno. You're very passionate, and so I want to ask you about this. You talk about the heart of oligarchy. I would like to ask you, what do you think about the Rothschild dynasty? And some time ago, there was also this Panama paper scandal. And I wonder what happened, since we have no information. I mean, we don't listen to this anymore. So we have another question. Now, good evening. You emphasize the fact that the system reacts and persecutes us. Now, it came into my mind a man that is being persecuted because he was arrested just to give us some news, and he never killed people or put bombs or whatever. He made public some documents which unmasked the violence and the lies of this elite, and his name is Julian Assange. However, Assange history did not stimulate our society to a greater reaction to indignation, and I think he was not supported in the way that he deserved by the people. I don't know if in the future we will have again someone who give us such these kind of news instead of the usual bullshit. Thanks. Good evening.
Buonasera. Dunque, la mia domanda è questa.
So, Mauro Scardovelli quotes you very often as a person to be listened to. I would like to ask you if you are part of the project involving thinkers, economists, sociologists, and constitutional jurists to formulate theories and stimulate a new thinking in our society. Thank you. So, of course, I know a lot of speculations or thoughts that we usually do about this oligarchy. There are a lot of theories. They are more or less oriented towards conspiracy theories, the 13 families, the Freemasonry, until the reptile aliens. I do not know if these theories are real, but I want to ask you, does it change anything? To me, it doesn't really, because I have a biblical vision, and the biblical vision, this world has some powers, hostile powers that are against humanity and the quest for truth. These mysterious forces use also human beings as the forces of the good are using human beings. Also the dark forces are using human beings. So as Saint Paul used to say, our enemies are not flesh and blood, indeed. I mean, this enslavement, this negativity, I mean, these are all forces of the darkness, but they can be organized like Freemasonry, Satanism, but in my opinion, it doesn't really change much. I cannot be sure about that. I can suppose it's a natural process where if you follow egotistical interest, like PMS, selfish interest, then the consequence is that you have aggregation of people in the world history. Certainly, there has been in the past stories of families of bankers, great businessmen that exploited wars and sometimes caused them. This is sure. I am not very passionate to study in the details those speculations, because it doesn't really change the problem in his heart. You know, the fight is always the same. The fact that there are more or less centers of power, organized or less organized, alien reptilians, I don't know if they exist. I think they're aliens anyway. I mean, either they are aliens or I am the alien. I am disciple of one who said, I am not of this world, my kingdom does not belong to this world, my kingdom does not belong to this world. I'm already king. I'm already king. I told you guys, I've already won. I wake up in this morning and I see the powers of this world. I studied them, I described them, but I know them. But I see that they're strong, but they're also losers. They're very cynicals. They're like louses, like bugs. I am king. I am king. And these are louses. So during the morning, I wake up like that. I'm weird. But believe me, this feeling is the thing that drives them crazy the most. I saw a lot of people becoming crazy in one way or another in front of me when they understand that everything they have is not interesting for you, and then they have no weapons. All what you have, you mighty person, to me is just shit. You are full of shit. And what I have, you can't even understand. You see what I mean? So, they are who they are, and they have to be fought. So, concerning the Panama Papers and Assange story, well, we have some mysteries in our history, and for example, if we talk about Italy history, we don't know who killed Aldo Moro, why, massacres. We're still missing lots of important things in our national history. I mean, it's pretty confused. Some things are confused, and there are some things that we don't know, are obscure. We will see and understand them at the end of times for those who have faith, but they're still very obscure in the dark. And there are the martyrs, those people that always fought against the tide, paying with their lives, and they were never recognized. And this is a norm, a standard, it's not an exception. I don't think this will finish. On the contrary, I believe that we can hope in a realistic way that, you know, things are becoming tightening, and as a, you know, there was a great poet that called it the bottleneck. So things will happen, and but in the system there will be cracks that will open. So I believe that the new people groups that will be able to offer alternative information, they are already rising, they will rise in the future, and we have to cooperate with our forces. Everyone can do something. In my very small way, I opened up a YouTube channel of Darsi Pace. YouTube was born in the United States in 2005, and the first Italian video for Darsi Pace is 2007-2008, and I opened up the channel. So I had the very strong feeling that it was important, and we have now more than 400 videos, self-produced, of good quality, which have thousands of people visualizing and watching them every day. So I'm not the only one, and it's possible to introduce in this totalitarian body, in this system, some antidotes. Until we will build a culture and political aggregation, which I wish and hope it will continue to grow. There are many movements arising, but I think we're still missing an anthropological, philosophical, unitary vision. Even Naomi Klein, in her last book, she does not understand the reason why there is weakness in all these movements. I think the reason of this weakness is just the lack of a unitary vision, which cannot be only the vision of a historical left party. Even the best vision is not enough. You know, we talk about rights and justice, and it's not enough to create a new revolutionary aggregation. So we have to go towards this humanity which is arising. It's a new revolutionary subject. There is no more, the revolutionary subject is no more a matter of social classes or indigenous population. This is too weak. It's a humanity that is rising, that comes across everyone. Even oligarchs have their own rising humanity inside themselves. And this is the weakness of all these movements, but sooner or later we will have an aggregation of a greater vision, impressive technical ability. You see, we have to face important matters, this transition of the job market, but we don't have to listen to this ridiculous chat as if we were in the 70s. So the Green New Deal, if we want to talk seriously, it's something overwhelming, great. We should invest money, thousands of billions right now. So it's not a comedy, okay? We're not joking here. So if you know how things are going on, you know that we're far away from this. And of course I am a friend of Mauro Scardovelli. We met years ago. We started in 2016, 17, 18, some meetings in Trevi, and we started meetings with other people, economists, philosophers, psychologists, educators, going towards this direction. We're always in contact, and therefore it's likely that we will continue to cooperate in this direction. Therefore, all expressions of cooperation and aggregation have to be favored and empowered. Trying to say what I also said in 2017 in Trevi, when I told Mauro that we must identify something, some common factor among all these movements that can bring them all together, because otherwise we would not constitute a sufficient critical force. So I'm like Socrates that can keep talking up until tomorrow. So I feel honored to ask you these questions. My name is Alessandro Bruno. This is my last name. I'm a retired doctor. So I come from Matera. I think that some of you might know him. It's a sponsored city, European Capital of Culture 2019. And everything that is happening during this time, more than culture, is just entertainment rather than culture, actually. So I perceive the first discomfort in this situation, and then I'll give you another news. Matera is one of the 5 cities out of Italy that has been selected to test the 5G technology in Europe. So Matera is in a region, Basilicata, which has always been a land of conquest. We have been with the Bourbons, then it's been part of the Magna Greece, the Greater Greece, where the culture flourished, and we had Pythagoras, just in Metaponto province of Matera. And another news is that we had 2 kinds of gold. We had the blue gold, so water, plenty of water. We have 5 dams, and we also have one of the biggest gas of Europe. And one of this is about now a news about that it was written in the newspaper Repubblica. At the airport of Bari, there was a Emirate who landed to meet our foreign minister Di Maio in Matera, and I'm reflecting about the fact that maybe they are buying something from us already. So they are dealing with oil, and of course we had lots of tumors, cancers, increasing due to the pollution, and it's only a news, it's only a reflection. These are only my thoughts. I think it's pretty interesting because, in my opinion, these are facts telling us that every revolution has to be local. So, for example, we're talking about Italy, but then it has to be also deeply local. Because what is happening in Matera, it's known by the people living in Matera. So are these small, in fact, there are the small communities that are damaged by this kind of extractive and exploitative politics. There are entire regions of the world which have already been destroyed and devastated. As I said to Gustavo, there is a vision of people that can be sacrificed because of their territories. So when there are some excavations in Alaska or in other regions of Canada looking for oil, you know exactly that those territories will be devastated and the population will be devastated. But everyone knows, or we think, that they can be sacrificed for a greater interest. So this is the extractive perspective, and this is the reason why Vandana Shiva talks about genocide, but this is not the future, actually. This is the present, and it's been going on for a long time. Actually, Klein says that America and Canada, these things are taking place ever since, that there's been centuries going on, and I think that these population that are on those territories, they have to revolt against these politics. They must resist against this devastation, but they must be coordinated in a greater way, and coordinated because they have great disposal of measures to force you, also military. So first of all, they try to convince you, as mentioned by Perkins in his book. It's a little bit, about conspiracy. So first of all, it's talking about Ecuador's situation. So first you will have, they send you people that tell you, yes, we will give you some loans to build some infrastructures. You will pay back these loans with the oil that we will take back. And then little by little, this population, these nations become poor. They are left in misery. Their territory are devastated. Entire regions cannot be populated no more because they're polluted by the oil that contaminates and kill all living species. And then if they don't succeed in this, then there are, they send the sharks to convince you, and they simply kill you. There are so many heads of states that were killed from Iran to Ecuador. So if they don't convince you in that way, then they make wars. They occupy territories. So when we talk about revolution, we talk about something very serious, something peaceful, but at the same time it's very serious, which in my opinion will require a greater awareness by local communities. So the problem is that in Basilicata, we are experiencing a kind of coma. We live isolated from geographical and cultural point of view. We're 500,000 people distributed in a territory over 10,000 square kilometers, and therefore we do not see each other very often. And after this event, Matera, capital of European culture, which has been a big bluff and that hypnotized lots of people that were enthusiastic, but there is no awareness about that. Yes, of course, this aggregation is not there. I'm trying to explain that to you. So we need to develop it. So I also quoted several important thinkers, Vandana Shiva, Naomi Klein, Ulrich Beck, Bauman. They're all aware of the fact that there is a problem. The problem is relationship and aggregation. So, we need to create a so-called new imagination. Even Latouche says that. We have a vision of the man that it's that one of the advertisement industry, of corporation, of this narrow-minded politics, of neoliberalism. So there is a framework that was never really contrasted. And we must say and highlight the fact that this is a false framework, and we need to reshape and redesign the frame. This is already happening, and then of course we have to work on our territories as small groups in small area. And this is truly revolutionary, is to put together a great vision with local work, with personal relationship, with families. So this is very revolutionary. It involves also to rethink working time. So to have a serious relationship with a man or a woman, and to give birth to people that won't have to come into my groups for the next 20 years to cure themselves. You have to give them the time and the possibility to see each other. But the current structure of work just makes everything impossible. So people goes out from home 7 a.m., 7:15, and then goes back to 7 p.m. home after, they crossed, urban traffic, like in Rome, Milan, New York, Paris, London, dozens of kilometers spent in, in a traffic jam. And this poor lady, I imagine, she woke up at 7:15, and she brought her children in the kindergarten. And maybe they were crying, and then they were screaming because, they wanted to sleep more. And then she goes back to pick them up at 6, 7, and she has to bring them home, to wash them, to clean them, to feed them. And then the husband goes back, and he should have a relationship, but also the husband is definitely angry and pissed off, and he wants only to sit down and be in front of television and watch bullshit. These two people should have also an erotic relationship. Well, maybe with some cocaine. No, I'm joking. Then there are those who defend family, or the same people that want also an economy that is even more even more free, and these two things are not consistent. We have to imagine a new society. We have to contrast this idea of working time, and we should earn more, and we should have relationship, and we should take care of our parents, of our children. So isn't this the whole development of the person? And to ask this today in a serious way, it's revolutionary. It implies a full reformation of working labor, fields, philosophy, and of our relationships. We have to do this, and we will do this. Well, this will happen, and I try to do this. But there are moments in history which can change things very fast. And I try to work to make this transition less traumatic and violent as possible. But there is no doubt that these powers about which we discuss nowadays are blind. They're blind, they do not understand. These oligarchies are blind, especially towards the end. The more they approach their end, the more they become stupid. So during 1785, French aristocracy argued at Versailles about who should have been sitting closer to the king. And this was the great argument and topic, and 4 years later they would have, faced the guillotine, including king and queen. So the Soviet oligarchy and the European communism during 1985 was full of essays and writing about the philosophical and political developments of Soviet communist world in Eastern Europe. Even in Italy it was full. No one could have thought such a collapse, a breakdown, and that was almost painless apart in Romania. Therefore, the oligarchy are so blind, self-centered. They are so blind they don't realize what is happening. And look at some TV shows, talk shows, with these eyes. So they are talking about things that, in the light of the things that we just said today, are just insane, crazy. People that do not know, do not see what's happening around. It's insane. They don't go around, they are closed up in their cocoon, they don't go around, they don't have, they don't have relationship to real people. In our groups, we listen to each other, and we ask ourselves, how are you? And people are, sick. In many respects, this illness, this confusion, this lack of direction, of meaning, this is not represented neither in our culture nor in politics. And it's a great human mass that nobody is talking to. And sometimes when I'm invited in TV shows, and those people that, for example, are in the audience, people paid to be there, standing up this way. So I look towards them and I talk to them. And when I say something, they smile, they think. So, but then they realize that it's real, that I'm not in a nightmare, that there is somebody that's talking about what I'm feeling, and it's amazing. So we need to create, in a way, a political and cultural representation. When I listen sometimes, for example, the writers or intellectuals or philosophers, I always have the feeling that they are not talking to anybody. Well, they say interesting and beautiful things, but they do not speak to you, to somebody in front of them. They're as if they're in a bubble. So I am interested in breaking the bubble. I'm interested in breaking the bubble to find the human element. So wake up, let's wake up, as Saint Benedict says. Let's wake up. It's not easy, we will need time. But the revolutionary movement and this revolutionary consciousness is fun in itself. It's lots of fun. Even just entering within a perspective of changing things, it's already reinvigorating. There is one last question. Good evening, my name is Maurizio. I would like to ask you, so going back to a global vision, it seems that actually the so-called revolutions happen almost exclusively when the surviving, and not the living, but the surviving, it's menaced. So I want to ask you, since probably as you were telling us, we are living in a very unique and peculiar historical moment from many respects. So if this time we could avoid this cycle that it seems to condemn our lives. You're right. But the problem is that, as we said many times, the climate change, if it doesn't hit you personally, it's something that we perceive as very far away and distant. And even when it touches us personally, because we see that there are great fires in California, storms in Japan, and devastations, but human beings, we think these are supernatural or extraordinary natural events, and we have the tendency to try and survive, but we don't want to change. So yes, unfortunately it's true, we're not prone to radical changes if we're not forced. And paradoxically, we are in an impasse, we are in a situation of extreme danger, but we do not see it because it doesn't touch us, but it touches us on another way. So some specific cultivation in Italy are no more available, for example. They're wasted. We already experience processes of desertification here in France, but we don't understand it. We still don't understand. And of course, my job and my work is that to give people a greater awareness before we find ourselves in a catastrophic event. But, I have no illusions. It will be what it will be. I don't know. I have a biblical and apocalyptic vision of history. Yeah, I am not afraid in the course of the great history that there could be shocking collapse to wake us up. It would be the first time. I have not. I fight for what I can, so that this change could be less traumatic, catastrophic, and I'm working towards this, and I believe that it's possible to mitigate such an impact, especially if we prepare our subjectivity, an inner work, contemplation, practice, meditation, So, for example, we should go on the street and there should be like, manifestation to say meditation for everyone from kindergarten, like they do in India. Why? Because this will make us stronger, more resilient even towards the stronger impacts of history. So it's good to work in at economical and political level, but we should also work at an inner level. And I understand why such an intelligence like Naomi Klein, she gets very close to this, but she does not go farther. So we must reach to the point that we know that our humanity is not only selfish and greedy, but with an ideology, it's not enough. We cannot explain that. We know that we can overcome our appetite, our natural appetite for all these things, of this selfishing, as Plato said, this desire. And I know we can, but it's not enough to tell ourselves, okay, we can do that and we can name that. No, it's not enough. We have to undergo a personal change, daily change. I have to feel it, I have to understand it, I have to feel it in my flesh to understand that I am a subject in relationship and not an egopathic one, because otherwise it becomes an ideology, and we know that the small ego can be, fits himself with everything, even with environmentalism.
Non Paolo, ma Andrea. Grazie.
Now, before you leave, I would like to say very quickly that there are those groups, Darsi, Pace, but we're also streaming this meeting in our Facebook page. You can follow all our activities in our website and Facebook and Marco Guzzi Facebook page. There are flyers outside. So, all the best to you. Let's have fun, let's have fun. Let's have fun, let's keep the frequencies high.